Welcome in. It is a Wednesday edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Got a big show. Josh Pate of 24/7 and CBS Sports coming up in just a bit. This is College Football Smothered and Covered. And of course, we are powered by Locked On.
You are Locked On College Football Smothered and Covered with your host, Barrett Sallee. Your one-stop shop for everything college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. It's College Football Smothered and Covered. Of course, we are powered by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today. And of course, we thank you for being the first listen, making this your first listen every single day. I really appreciate it. And of course, we are available wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, all of those places, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we got a big show. My former colleague, Josh Pate, who does the late kick, used to do the late kick, I should say. Now it is Josh Pate's College Football Podcast. He will be along in just a minute. And of course, we will talk about the big game in Madison. A little disrespectful what the odds makers are doing to those Badgers. And there's a quarterback change for an ACC team that I thought might make some noise. Might make some noise in their new conference. Joined now by my good friend, my former coworker, and all-around good meteorologist and podcast host. You know him as Josh Pate. You can watch him on the Josh Pate College Football Show. Look, dude, I wore this shirt just for you. In fact, you bought me this shirt, I do believe. R.I.P. Georgia Dome.
Yeah, gone. It's not forgotten.
Never forgotten.
I have a dream. It's a recurring dream. Some people have all kinds of different dreams. Mine is a MARTA bus pulls in front of Mercedes-Benz Stadium and leaves, and the Georgia Dome is back. That is my dream.
Man, I am all for that happening. That monstrosity that they built next to it. Like every time I walk through that plaza, because the media parking lot's right next to it. Yep. Every time I walk through that plaza, I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Where'd it go?
This used to be the Georgia Dome.
It was the best. It was the best. And now we're stuck with that monstrosity.
Have you noticed, by the way, the big gripe about the Georgia Dome was, well, it didn't have enough luxury seating and this and that. And it's kind of like TV ratings in college football. 99% of people should have no interest in that. And somehow the 1% has convinced the 99%, you guys should care about this and you should talk about it, to the point where every Sunday, like clockwork, I got fans beating their chest because their game did a 9.7 rating. It doesn't matter for you. And I got folks in Atlanta beating their chest. Mercedes-Benz Stadium's got more luxury seating. You sit in section 338. What are you talking
nobody
about?
cares. Nobody cares. None whatsoever. And they could have easily made some luxury seating, like at the 50-yard line, put a little club underneath it. You'd be good to go. But no, Arthur Blank decided he wanted to ruin everything. You know who also ruined everything is Texas.
Sure. Because
Michigan was sitting there. You were at this game, and Michigan looked like a JV team. And, I always say, when you're at warmups, when you're on the field and you see warmups and you see just a size, speed, just a physical difference between two teams, you kind of know what the result would be. And it looked like it on the field, because it looked like men amongst boys, especially in the speed department. Did you see that?
Yeah. I don't know that it was that hard to see coming. It wasn't quite like us watching Georgia TCU warm up or anything like that. But it was not, in other words, this was not something I think you needed to be in Michigan Stadium to see. If you just understand rosters, you understand recruiting. You know who Texas has, you know who Michigan has, you know who Michigan lost. And so Michigan is not some poverty program. Now, physically, they're an impressive team. Texas is world class. Texas is probably the biggest team, pound for pound, biggest athletic team, pound for pound, in the country. Like, Barrett, I'm telling you, I'd put them up against Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. Those rosters favor very comparably. And so I was so amused last week leading up to this game when people did their breakdowns and they said, now, if Michigan can turn this game into a fight, then they've got a chance. And I can tell you, confidently can tell you, folks around the Texas program not only felt confident if that were the case, they wanted that to be the case. Like, they relished the idea of going in there and fighting Michigan because they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, they're deeper, they're 7 deep at wide receiver. They got 3 quarterbacks better than Michigan's starter. So who was going to bully who? There was never a scenario where Michigan physically outclassed Texas. You'd play a game 100 times. Michigan would win a few of those games because football's weird. But it wouldn't be because they outclassed Texas physically. That was never going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny because I rarely get to watch pregame shows because, dad life, baseball, softball, whatever. I did on Saturday, and the question came up on both of the big pregame shows: is Texas back? And I'm sitting there going, have you guys been like in a cave? Have you been in a coma? For a year, were you in the cryo-frozen Demolition Man, like wherever Sylvester or Wesley Snipes was? Like, why does this narrative still exist? I don't understand it.
It's just easy to say, I guess. They're going to do the same thing about Miami. Miami's going to have a really good season this year, but if they do anything but win a national title this time next year, Miami will win a big game, and someone will ask, is Miami back? And it's like they collectively got amnesia over the spring and summer. This is what happens. This is why you and I disagree on the offseason. You check yourself into the offseason hotel, and you end up saying things like, is Texas back? Well, by my estimation, they were one of 4 teams left at the table last year.
I do believe that was the case.
Like what? I don't know. And I don't doubt what you're saying is true. I obviously didn't get to see the shows, but that's out there everywhere. It's Texas back. It's like your mind doesn't always have to default to the lowest hanging fruit headline. You can think critically about this. It is okay. It's allowed.
It is. And I was just stunned. Like I literally chuckled, and my son looks at me. He's like, what's so funny? And I was like, dude, I don't want to go down this road. It's a long, long story. It's kind of like Notre Dame is always overrated preseason. I'm like, Notre Dame's actually properly rated preseason.
Penn State,
almost consistently. Same thing with Penn State. You will be in Columbia, South Carolina, which usually is the hottest place on the planet, but it might be the wettest place on the planet. I tell you what, I did not see South Carolina, Kentucky coming. I thought it could be the opposite, but I did not see South Carolina just flat out bullying and out physicaling a team in Kentucky. Like, that's Mark Stoops' calling card. And then yet Kennard and Dylan Stewart, they just take over the line of scrimmage. I don't know if that's sustainable again, and certainly against an LSU offensive line, but what did you think? Because I was just floored with what South Carolina did.
I bet Kentucky. I laid 9.5 points. Like, I was very confident. I was very confident, and it just whiffed. I mean, hopefully it's the biggest whiff I have all year, because I don't know how it can get any worse. That's like a 40-point separation from expectation in terms of odds making. So, couple of things. I do agree with you that particular outcome is not sustainable in terms of the way they made it happen. So this Saturday, they play LSU. Their pass rush last week just tore Kentucky to pieces. That is not the way you would tear LSU to pieces. My guess is LSU 6th best pressure rate allowed in the country through 2 games. My guess is they can handle the edge rush okay. Now, you can handle the edge fine 95% of the time, and if the 2 times you let it leak end up being forced fumble turnovers, then it doesn't really matter. Like, I understand how football works, but I think that the formula this week is you got to get Nussmeier in a bunch of 3rd and 5 pluses, which they can do because LSU has not run the ball well, and they lost Emory for the season, and Jaden Daniels is not there to tote it himself. So get him in 3rd and long, let the crowd sink its teeth into you, and then maybe you do force turnovers. Maybe you do force non-offensive scores, or you set your offense up in plus field position. That's the way they would have to do this. Like, on paper, where football is not played, but it's talked about, LSU should win this game. They should cover in this game. Backs against the wall, I view it as an early season must win. for them, because if they're 1-2, they're not good enough to go to South Carolina and win. They're not good enough to beat Ole Miss. They're not good enough to beat Bama, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida, especially going to those places. All those games are in doubt if you're not the quality of team that can go win at South Carolina. And so we're talking about a 7-5 or a 6-6 incoming for LSU. So my advice to them, and listen to this, Barrett, my advice to LSU is to win the football game. That's what I would do if I were them. I would want to go win the football game. But if South Carolina does pull that off, I don't know what the bigger story is. I'm not doing one of those headlines, did so-and-so win it or did so-and-so lose it? But who's it the bigger story for? If we called our shot here, you and I are talking midweek. If we called our shot, this is the bigger story. South Carolina wins, LSU loses. I would say the bigger story would be LSU losing, because the ramifications would have impacted a team that many expected to be at maybe that 12-team table at the end of the year. No one expected that from South Carolina. Interesting. And then you've got, like you said, 80% chance of thunderstorms as you and I are talking. Noon kickoff, game day in town, the whole new Saturday tour in town. There's a lot of external that is impacting this game right now.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what the atmosphere is like, because I think that's a little bit of an equalizer. Garrett Nussmeier can run, but he's more of just a willing runner, right? Yep. He'll do it. LaNorris Sellers is a little bit more adept to running. He is, I think when you look at a situation, if there is rain, and I know you will be all over it because you are the best non-professional meteorologist in the world. In fact, I remember one time at Media Days in Atlanta, you were like giddy, jumping up and down when something came through. I was like, okay, cool. Josh has got us covered. If we got to go down to the basement, we're going to the basement. But to me, that sort of benefits South Carolina in the sense that Sellers knows where he's going.
Yep.
And Beamer's, obviously, the family tree, special teams matters. And one special teams play could be huge. So I think that favors South Carolina. What do you think?
Well, I would agree. And you also can add on to that, LSU under Brian Kelly has been a pretty shaky commodity away from Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said on paper, I emphasized on paper, because it's not a phrase I use a lot. On paper, I can make you a very clear case why LSU should win the game and cover, why South Carolina is probably a little overinflated, honestly, following that week 1 result where it counts 31-6 was the final. But normally, if the way you get to your point total isn't majority based on offensive numbers, from an odds making perspective and from a predictability perspective, you would say that's harder to duplicate. Special teams and defensive scoring is harder to duplicate week over week. So I can say all that. But as soon as you start the game, and South Carolina's up 10-0 because LaNorris Sellers escaped the pocket and found a guy wide open behind the defense, and then it starts raining and they force a turnover and kick a field goal because they set up at their own or at your 20-yard line, and it's like 9:40 to go first quarter, home team's up 10-0, crowd's on fire. It doesn't matter what the paper says at that point, is my point. And so that can easily happen here.
It could. And, but I think, God, the narratives, if that happens, if LSU's 1-2, especially because the one, Nichols was not exactly the crisp game either. The narrative came out of the USC game that LSU's overrated. And I kept thinking to myself, no, I think we underrated USC because they did this thing called tackling.
Yep.
Which I think is an integral part of the sport.
A lot of teams are doing it.
Generally speaking, it's a trend that has been around for a little while now. Is that fair? Because look, USC, to me, we know what they can do offensively. Lincoln's a genius. Thought there was a philosophical problem with him in terms of how he operates because it was the same at Oklahoma. Get Danton Lynn there, and they have a game like that against LSU. To me, that's a scary, scary team in the Big Ten where Oregon doesn't look great. Michigan obviously has issues. I don't know what that was with Penn State last week against Bowling Green. To me, USC doesn't just look like a different team. They look like a contender if this continues in terms of tackling.
They are the story of the season so far, to me. No less than the story of the season. Think about how long we have said, wow, this Lincoln Riley team's explosive. Any quarterback he has is a Heisman Trophy favorite or contender. wow, these are impressive games to watch offensively. What if he ever had a pretty good to great defense to go along with that? Same thing we've said about Heupel and in Knoxville and in LA.
Just be average. Just be average.
But what if they're above average? So, yeah, we asked for average, but I'm watching Tennessee and USC so far. But USC more emphatically, I think it's the story of the year, because I agree with you. As soon as I watched that LSU game, I didn't bump LSU even a fraction of a point in my power ratings. I thought they played exactly to the level I thought they would. We look at USC, and I don't need to see 10 weeks of that. Like as soon as I saw week 1, I know dramatic scaling up has happened defensively. Miller Moss is either a stud or he's going to be one at quarterback. So I don't ever worry about Lincoln Riley on offense. If they can do that, and I think they can, I don't think it was a mirage, then they're a contender for anything. Because offensively, you know what you're getting. And if I have a team that can play that way, there is nothing that is out of reach for them. And this is not some young head coach. It's a head coach who's got a ton of experience and had to reinvent himself a little bit. And that story, I think 5 years down the road, it'll be appreciated and books will be written on it. We are living through a documentary on Lincoln Riley right now. We're in the middle of it. Like, this is one of the big chapters that it'll be at the midpoint of the documentary down the road. And we'll look back and we'll say, oh, that LSU game, turns out that was a turning point. That was one of the inflection points. But you don't have to wait 5 years. Like, you should feel that now. Yeah, you should feel it now.
Last thing, one of the surprises on the other side, the disappointments, I should say, of the season has been Oregon. Because, look, you look at their stats and you're like, oh, Dylan Gabriel's throwing the ball all over the place. They're putting up all these points. But they're losing the battle at the line of scrimmage consistently. And I'm thinking to myself, especially during that Boise State game late Saturday night, like, where is this coming from? Because the one thing that I knew, or at least I thought I knew, was that Dan Lanning's teams are going to punch you in the mouth. And when you get back up, they're going to punch you in the mouth again. And I mean, it's like they're trying to pillow fight Mike Tyson out there. Do you fix that? Because I don't think you fix that.
Well, a lot of times you don't. I get a little different feel with them. They are still mixing and matching on the O-line. Their right tackle's been gone for a few weeks. Bedford, they'll get him back. They strike me, and we see this every year, they strike me as the kind of team that on the GPS, they're still in the orange area, but there is blue ahead. Like, you're going 20 miles an hour. You know, if I can just get to that blue, I can open it back up. We'll go the speed limit. We'll go 80 and we'll be fine. Sometimes that orange just keeps extending as traffic keeps getting backed up. Sometimes you never reach full speed. I feel like they're a team that eventually will hit its stride and will make us look back on week 1 and 2 and say, boy, where did that Oregon team go? This one looks good. Why didn't they look like this week 1 and week 2? That happens every year. This team finds itself in week 4 or week 5. It's just everyone's not ready to hit the gas in week 1. We have no preseason in this sport. The portal more than ever has made putting a team together a little different proposition than it used to be. And so if we had 3 or 4 weeks of preseason games and everyone started with a marquee opponent, maybe we'd have more consistency in start. But we don't. I mean, they got blown out by Georgia a couple of years ago in week 1. Ended up being an okay team. This year, had they played a marquee opponent early on, they'd have a loss. If they played LSU, they'd probably have a loss on their schedule, but they didn't. And they've got Oregon State this week on the road. Interested to watch that, but they have a very mid to backloaded schedule. So they're the team that can afford to find itself. Ole Miss is not struggling, but Ole Miss could have afforded this if they wanted to. It's just such an imbalance in the way college scheduling works.
Well, you mentioned navigation. Waze is going to lead you to Columbia this weekend. What do you got going on?
I'm going to get over there Thursday night. Alyssa Lang sent us a list of restaurants and barbecue joints to try. Just
she should.
Yeah, it's not restaurants. It's just barbecue joints. So we're going to hit those up Friday. I am going to probably go get me a workout in at the facility because my favorite thing to do is working out at team facilities. And so I find any excuse that I can to do that. And then we're just going to sit in lawn chairs in the hotel parking lot and stare at the sky and see what's going to happen rain-wise.
Well, and your phone, because you've got all those fancy weather meteorology apps.
I'll give you my login.
I am 100% on board with that. Well, Josh, appreciate you hopping on. Georgia Dome forever.
Yes.
Hey guys, I want to take a moment and tell you about a new game that I've discovered on my phone. It's called Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of, I don't know, South Carolina, trying to get that big home upset over LSU? From recruiting players and hiring a coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle that pressure? Here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays. Your strategy will not only determine the success of the football season, but shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, and it is actually available offline, so you can play on the go whenever you want. And of course, we have a very special deal for Locked On listeners all over the Locked On network. Use Locked On CFB, all caps, Locked On CFB inside the game store, and you'll receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just go to ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the ad stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your legacy today. We are also brought to you by Game Time. If you want tickets, Game Time is your place. It's a new feature there called Game Time Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. They have curated deals to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. They have the super deal, seat views before you buy, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College. That is Locked On College for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, odds makers are being disrespectful. Very disrespectful. And my colleague over at Outkick, David Hookstead's very, very mad about this. 16.5 points the Badgers are home underdogs to Alabama. This is an Alabama team that just needed a magical fourth quarter to escape USF. Now, I think USF's actually better than a lot of people realize, but still, this Alabama team is undisciplined. They commit way too many penalties against USF. They're turnover prone. 3 fumbles last week. And think about those two problems: discipline and ball security. Going into a game at Camp Randall Stadium, and you're laying 16.5 points. That's disrespectful to Wisconsin. It's disrespectful to Luke Fickell. It's disrespectful to Tyler Van Dyke. And it's disrespectful to the fans of the Wisconsin Badgers. I'll tell you, we'll do picks later on in the week. One of my picks will be Wisconsin, plus whatever it is at the time that we record the show. No doubt in my mind. Because not only are there those issues, I fully anticipate Kalen DeBoer trying to milk the clock, trying to go old school, and trying to shorten this game as much as possible. So if you're a Wisconsin Badger fan, if you're Fickell, if you're anybody on that staff, if you're Van Dyke, you know what that line is. They'll say they don't. Coaches and players all the time say they don't look at that stuff. They are liars. Liars. Every single one of them. They know exactly what it says. They know exactly what Vegas thinks of them. And they use it to motivate in either direction, both positive and negative. And why is there disrespect for Tyler Van Dyke? Is it left over from Miami? Yeah. The guy hasn't been bad at Wisconsin. He's been essentially what every Wisconsin quarterback is. A caretaker. He's not a difference maker, a caretaker. If you're going to take care of the ball, if you're going to take care of moving the chains and not really necessarily stretch the field as much as other quarterbacks, that means that the game's going to be shorter too. 16.5 points. Very, very disrespectful. We will take a break. There is a quarterback change in the ACC. Who is it? We'll talk about it next. It's college football smothered and covered. And of course, we are part of the Locked On College or Locked On Podcast Network. We are brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different from you now. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. And download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so I was wrong. I was wrong about SMU. I thought that when SMU got to the ACC, that there would be a shock value. There will be a surprise that all fans didn't necessarily think about. There would be a realization that Rhett Lashley, who has been on this program, was one of the best coaches in America. And look, I still feel like he is one of the best coaches in America. I thought part of the reason that SMU would be a threat in the ACC was Preston Stone. Because before Preston Stone got injured last year, one of the best quarterbacks you've never heard of. Can stretch the field, can run the football. But over the first 2 games, an absolute disaster. So Lashley said that Kevin Jennings would start at quarterback moving forward. Now, we saw Jennings a little bit. You kind of know what you're getting from him. And it did seem like from the start of that Nevada game in week 0 that there was a concerted effort to let both of these guys play. And it got me thinking about the conversation that I had with Rhett on this show. I wouldn't say that he was dodging questions about the quarterback, but if you kind of go back and watch that, kind of non-committal about exactly what the plan was. And so I am fascinated to see what happens here, because it's a kind of like the Peyton Thorne situation, right? Good at practice, not a gamer. I think that might have prevented Kevin Jennings from being the starting quarterback. But we saw he's a gamer. But the ceiling, I'd love to know what the ceiling is. If he's getting second-team reps and maybe some first-team reps, and then he's put in the game in situations that are suboptimal, you're putting him in a situation where it's almost impossible to succeed. But if he's the #1 for an entire week, things might change. And man, I am disappointed. Disappointed in myself. I thought things would be different. That will do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making this your first listen. And of course, for your second listen, go watch Locked On College Football. Go listen to Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does a great job covering the country. If you want to know where to get that, look in the description below. Whether you're on Apple or YouTube or wherever, there is a description, and that will be in the description below. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will talk to you tomorrow.